Okay, cool. So actually, let me also, while we're here, so you can share your screen later, let me make you a co-host.
Thank you.
All
I've got
right.
some sharing to do.
Okay, so that should be settled. All righty. Well, everyone, thanks for coming out to our final meeting of the year. I know it's been kind of crazy. Things have been canceled left and right just because, the nature of the year, nature of the semester. But, this is our last meeting. We can close it off on a real strong note with Terry, which is good. So let me just basic overview, super basic. First, we're gonna have our presentation by Terry Porter, and then we're gonna have, basic end of semester announcements, possible plans for next semester, as well as, how do we move forward from kind of the restrictions that were placed on us this semester. So with that, I will introduce to you Terry Porter, who was our former advisor, former part of the admissions staff here at OSU, who now works as, I believe, an assistant dean of admissions at OU.
Director, not dean,
Director.
not
Ooh,
yet, not yet.
okay. All right, so with that, let me stop sharing my screen and I'll let you take it away, Terry.
Awesome. So it is really awesome to be here with all of you. Those of you who remember me, you probably used to see me with like a tie and shirt on, but we're here in COVID. My hair's like 5 inches longer than it used to be, and I'm happy about that. I'm keeping it that way. But I don't know if you can see OSU College of Dentistry. Boom, right there for all of you. So, yeah, so I have been with Ohio University's Medical College, and I run admissions and outreach, community outreach for the Dublin location. So I still work with a lot of OSU students. So, I'm still a Buckeye, but also a Bobcat, always a Buckeye, always a Buckeye. So it is really, really cool that the owner asked me to come and speak with you all. SEAD was something that it started as SNDA, and we just had a different vision, and we created SEAD, and I'm so happy to see that it is here and moving forward. So I don't know if any of you caught. I actually spoke to the Predent Club about a month and a half ago. I'm not sure if any of you were present for that, but about half of the students left when I started talking. So I hope that that doesn't happen with you all. Um, I mentioned the election, and I think it kind of made some people mad, so they left. They left, but that's okay, because hey, you gotta call a duck in this world. So here we are, post-election, and still COVID, and the world is upside down and sideways, and all the craziness that you've all been experiencing since March. Still going on. Looks like we're heading into another uptick, huge uptick in the pandemic. Working for a medical college, we kind of uh, I wouldn't say we're privileged to information that you all aren't privileged to, but my dean is a doctor, so I get to talk to him about these things, and he knows what's up. So you know whenever something like this happens, everyone's affected. But I'm sure some are affected more than others. And the ones that are affected more than others typically are folks that are on the lower rung of the socioeconomic ladder, right? So that's always how it is. No matter what the situation is, they're always affected the most because that's the society that we have designed. And you might be like, Sasha's like, I didn't design this society. What are you talking about, T-Bone? We as a human society have designed this, and we keep it in check, we keep it in place, and there's a reason for that. The reason is the power structure wants it to be maintained. That's the idea of power, right? When you have senators that are 78 years old, 88 years old, you know, the oldest senators like 87, 88 years old. Time to go, right? Time to get out of Dodge and let some folks with new ideas. Hey, nothing against senior citizens, but something against lifelong politicians, right? That just stay there year after year after year, and they kind of forget what it means to serve the people. But folks in power, like I think some of you that remember me know I also teach sociology. So there's an idea that there's a power elite, and those are like your military, your government, and your business leaders, right? The big ones at the top, not like Captain Jones or Manager Dave. I'm talking like big ones. They have an interest in maintaining the power system because it benefits them financially. And here's the thing about power: by nature, when people have it, they don't want to typically give it up. So that's power in a nutshell. So tonight, I thought it'd be kind of cool at this time of year to look at social class and healthcare. And I know that you've probably looked at this a little bit before, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot, working with different students and teaching sociology. Right now, the class I'm teaching is called public sociology, and it looks at how we can be more engaged in creating a more socially just society. So I thought a nice way to wrap up the year, because we're heading into that time of Thanksgiving and holiday bliss, right? No matter how you celebrate, I still think this is the best time of year. And we all have things that we can be thankful for. I thought it'd be really cool to kind of to talk a little bit about social class and how it affects healthcare. So I am going to share a little bit of a PowerPoint. Let me get it here. All right. Okay. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
SEAD, yo. See, I'm excited. It's me being excited to be back talking with the SEAD folks. So I like quotes, and I think these are some great quotes about social class. So Victoria Woodhull, who's the first one to run for president, has this quote. She says, "It is not great wealth in a few individuals that proves a country is prosperous, but great general wealth evenly distributed among the people. It is the struggling masses who are the foundation, and if the foundation be rotten or insecure, the rest of the structure must eventually crumble." So think about that. If you look at society, as a ladder, right? And there are rungs in it, and you have a social class that's at the bottom rung, and they're holding on to this ladder. There might be a lot of them there, but they're holding on to this ladder that's kind of like really top heavy, because a lot of the resources are at the upper level, right? So you've got a small amount of people at the upper level of the ladder, and they're hanging on to a ton of the resources. And so these folks at the lower part of the ladder, they're like trying to keep that ladder from falling because it's so top heavy. Because, like, 1% of the population has 40% of the wealth. That's all at that top of the ladder. And then you've got a struggling middle class. It's like, we're trying to hang on to and get a little bit, but it's starting to teeter. And that's what Woodhull's talking about. If the foundation is rotten or insecure, the rest of it will fall too. And so when you have a social class at the lower class, the working class, the middle class that's struggling, it's going to make that foundation pretty easy to kind of blow over and fall down. I love this quote from Henry George. So you all know Buffalo are, right? Buffalo, right? Okay. So no person, I think, ever saw a herd of buffalo of which a few were fat and the great majority lean. No person ever saw a flock of birds of which two or three were swimming in grease and the others all skin and bone. So what George is saying here is that when you look to nature and you see like the herds and the tribes of animals, they're all getting along pretty well and doing their thing, taking care of each other, sharing their food, right? There's not like this, 10,000-pound buffalo walking around with maybe another, 8,000-pound buffalo and then a bunch of like 100-pound buffaloes. No, they're all kind of in it together. But if you look at our society, you see really fat buffalo, but a lot of really skinny buffalo. Okay, so I think these frame what social class, what it looks like with the haves and the have-nots. So I wanted to show a couple videos that the first one really kind of digs into what social class is, and then the second one talks about healthcare access and social class. So they have about 10-15 minutes on these, and then we'll come back and have a discussion on social class. All right, so hold on. Gotta get my Zoom legs back. Share the screen, share the computer sound, and here we go. Okay, so you all have popcorn for the movie? You know what sucks is you guys don't get pizza and stuff, like, because yeah, I miss Portofino's and all that good pizza we used to have at OSU. Okay, so let me start this first one. So this one is on the impacts of social class. So this is a sociology professor. She's a little hyper. She's interesting, but what she has to say is on the money. It's on point.
Matters. You probably already know that, and not only because you're a student of sociology, but because you're a person who lives in a society. But do you know how much it really matters? Social class is a huge determinant of many of the most fundamental aspects of modern life, from your education to your beliefs, as well as your values, your occupation, your income, and not only how you live, but also how you die. So let's talk about how class plays out in the lives of Americans today. Class starts to matter at the very beginning of your life. When we discussed socialization a few episodes ago, we talked about anticipatory socialization, or learning to fit into a group you'll someday be a part of, like a gender or a race. And one type of anticipatory socialization is class socialization, where parents convey to their children the values that go along with being upper class or middle class or working class. Let's take a simple example. Suppose you're a parent and your kid absolutely refuses to eat broccoli. How do you respond? Do you make them clear their plate and say that they shouldn't waste food? Or do you allow them to make decisions for themselves about what they eat? Now, you may be thinking, what? How does eating broccoli have anything to do with class? But how parents from different walks of life approach parenting can differ a lot by class, as American sociologist Annette Lareau found in her research on parenting styles. Let's go to the thought bubble to look at how social class can affect what kind of parent you are or what kind you have. In the 1990s, Lareau's research focused on observing families of elementary school students from upper middle class and working class backgrounds. In doing this, she realized that parents had very different approaches to how they educated and disciplined their kids. She found that upper middle class parents tend to be very involved in their kids' social and academic lives. Think scheduled play dates, after school activities, checking their homework assignments every night. The stereotype of a suburban helicopter mom isn't too far from the mark for some of these families. By contrast, working class parents, who were more likely to have less time and money to devote to these activities, were more likely to be hands-off in structuring their kids' free time. These kids might be more likely to be playing with whoever is around their neighborhood than going on play dates. Working class parents also tend to put a greater emphasis on obedience and discipline compared to their upper middle class counterparts, Lareau found. While a working class parent might tell their kids to eat their broccoli because I said so, an upper middle class parent is more likely to talk through decisions with their children in an effort to encourage autonomy. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So yes, a toddler's distaste for broccoli and their parents' reaction to it can tell us something about class. And these trends in parenting aren't the only difference in values and beliefs that we see across classes. Political views tend to vary across class groups too, with upper class Americans being more likely to be fiscally conservative and socially progressive, and lower class Americans being more likely to be the opposite. Even religion varies by class. Upper income Americans are more heavily represented in liberal Protestant groups like Episcopalians, Presbyterians, as well as Judaism, Hinduism, and atheism, whereas lower income Americans are more likely to identify as evangelical Protestants or Catholics. But beliefs and values aren't the only thing that vary by social class. A large component of class differences plays out through educational attainment and its consequences for success later in life. Education is sometimes called the great equalizer. The more people who have access to quality education, the more equal a society gets, or so the thinking goes. But whether you get a quality education varies by the social class you're born into, so we might be concerned that education will have the opposite effect and will actually help pass inequalities from one generation on to the next. There are a few ways that social class comes into play when we talk about education in the US. First, where do you live? Income segregation, or the tendency for families of similar income levels to live in the same neighborhoods, is incredibly common in the United States. If you've ever gone apartment hunting in a big city, this might not come as a surprise to you. An apartment in a good neighborhood or an area with low crime, good schools, and better quality housing costs way more than a home where crime and pollution are higher and education and job access is inconsistent. One reason that access to education varies by class is that public schools in the US are funded mainly at at the local level. So kids who grow up in affluent neighborhoods tend to have access to better schools because those communities provide more funding. So living in a better neighborhood tends to mean access to better educational facilities, as well as to technology like computers, good teachers, and a wider variety of classes and extracurriculars. And that's assuming you go to a public school. Upper class children are more likely to attend private schools, and this trend continues when we get past high school. We mentioned this last week. Children who grow up working class or low income are much less likely to attend college, and those who do are much more likely to attend public state schools or two-year community colleges. Among elite colleges, most students don't come from low-income families. They come from the very top of the income distribution. A recent study of social class and college attendance found that 38 elite colleges, including 5 in the Ivy League, Brown, Dartmouth, Penn, Princeton, and Yale, had more students who came from the top 1% than the entire bottom 60% of the income distribution. Some of this inequality in college access is helped along by the policy of preferential admittance for so-called legacy students, whose parents or other family members attended the college. Policies like this entrench class inequalities across generations by making it less likely that those from lower socioeconomic classes will move up the ladder. Plus, the social networks formed within prestigious colleges often are the stepping stones toward jobs and financial success later in life, which again makes it more likely that inequality will get passed on to a new generation. And of course, political and economic power tend to be concentrated among those at the top of the social class ladder. Dreaming of being president when you grow up? Of the 10 presidents who have held office in the last 50 years, 6 attended an Ivy League school for either their undergrad or postgrad studies. Every single one had at least a bachelor's degree. So education can seem less like the great equalizer in this case than the great barrier. Without a college degree, there are jobs that are pretty much impossible to get. The jobs that you can get without a college degree tend to come with lower prestige, lower pay, and a greater risk of occupational dangers. Which brings us to the last class difference we'll be talking about today: health. Social class affects how you live, but it also affects how you die. Mortality and disease rates vary by social class, with upper class Americans living longer and healthier lives. A man in the 80th percentile, or top of the income distribution, lives an average of 84 years, while a man at the bottom, in the 20th percentile, lives an average of 78 years. Women live longer than men typically. Yay for us! But the income gap is still similar here, with women in the 80th percentile living about 4.5 years longer than those in the 20th percentile. Why the huge gap? Some reasons might seem obvious. If you have more money, you can probably afford better health care, or for that matter, afford any health care. Others are maybe less straightforward. For example, low-income Americans tend to eat less healthy food. Now, is that just a matter of different choices made by different people, or is it a systematic pattern that links class with eating habits? Well, oftentimes, unhealthy foods are cheaper, both in terms of money and time. Lower-class Americans tend to have less leisure time and less money to spend on cooking healthy meals. After all, it takes a lot less time and money to pick up McDonald's than to spend an hour cooking a meal with expensive organic vegetables. Additionally, many low-income Americans live in what are known as food deserts, or neighborhoods without easy access to fresh foods like fruits and vegetables. Other systematic class differences come from the occupations that different classes tend to hold. Upper and middle-class Americans are more likely to be in white-collar, full-time jobs, which generally have lower exposure to dangerous materials and lower risks of accidents on the job. Not to mention more flexible work schedules. Less danger and less stress equals better health. Plus, full-time jobs are more likely to provide benefit packages, including health insurance and paid sick days. It's much harder to take care of your health if you can't take the time off work to go to the doctor or rest and recover. But that's the reality for many working-class Americans. Class gaps in health outcomes are clearly about more than just having the money to pay for better health care. It's about occupation, neighborhood, income, education, and all the different ways that advantages like these can overlap and determine your life course. That's why social class matters. It gives us a way to identify the advantages and disadvantages that different groups of people share, and understand the consequences of those advantages and disadvantages. Today we discussed 3 types of class differences we see playing out in the United States. First, the beliefs and values parents pass on to the next generation will vary by class. Second, there are class gaps in educational attainment which help perpetuate inequality across generations. And finally, Americans of lower socioeconomic status tend to have worse health and shorter lifespans than those with higher class status. Next time, we'll focus on...
Okay, so then I want to show a bit of a shorter video. It's called, Is Your Social Status Making You Sick?
Like you just don't measure up? Ever compare yourself to other people and feel like you just don't measure up? Like, why does Kim get all the likes? Well, did you know that comparing yourself to others might not just damage your ego, but actually make you sick? Fact. The United States is one of the most unequal countries of all developed nations in terms of financial inequality. That means that there's a huge gap in wealth between the rich and the poor. The gap hasn't been this big since the Great Depression back in the early 30s, and it keeps widening, with the upper class getting richer and the lower class getting poorer. You might have heard of Occupy Wall Street, which was a movement that brought a lot of attention to these class differences.
The complaints of corporate greed and social inequality are resonating far beyond the streets of New York.
But what exactly is social class? Well, it's a bunch of things. How much money you make, your education, and how fancy your job is. These are all factors in how others see and how you see your class in society. So what this does is create a social class ladder, and that actually impacts your health. You're probably thinking, well, duh, the higher you are in the social ladder, the better your health, because more money means healthier food, more exercise, and better healthcare. Bam, end of story, right? Well, maybe. Researchers have long known that social class is one of the most powerful predictors of health, more powerful than genes, smoking, or how much alcohol you drink. But there's another component to social class that often doesn't get as much attention: how you feel you compare to other people, or your subjective social status. So, does your subjective social status affect your health? And if it does, how? To figure this out, we have to start at the beginning with the now famous Whitehall study. Back in the 1970s, researchers tracked the health of over 18,000 British government workers. They fell into their own version of the social ladder: messengers and doormen at the bottom, execs up top. What they found was remarkable. Those at the bottom were 3 times as likely to die from just about any cause compared to those at the top. More remarkable still was that each class of worker had better health than the class just directly below it. This led researchers to look at subjective social status more closely. In fact, you can even find this in high school students. In a study similar to the Whitehall study, researchers tracked the health of 250 students. They looked at the social class of their parents, but also asked the students how they felt they compared to their classmates. Turns out, the social class of their parents wasn't nearly as important as students' subjective social status. Students that felt they were lower on the social ladder had higher blood pressure and reported getting sick more often. Okay, that's some pretty good evidence, but we still have a classic science problem: correlation versus causation. Maybe it's not that low social class is causing people to be less healthy. Maybe it's the other way around. People who are less healthy are in a lower social class. To tease this out, we can look at animal studies. Monkeys, our close cousins on the evolutionary tree, also form their own social ladders. In a recent study published in the journal Science, researchers found that if you changed a monkey's position on the ladder, you could alter its immune system. Moving a monkey from the top of the ladder down to the bottom actually decreased the level of disease-fighting cells. Researchers think that what's happening to the monkeys might also be happening to us humans. They call it the biological embedding of status. Being lower on the social ladder is associated with chronic, elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol plays a large part in the fight or flight response. Show up to class and totally forgot about that test? Cortisol kicks in, allowing you to either rise to the occasion and focus, or pull a 180 and head home. Once the situation's over, your cortisol levels will drop. But if you're chronically stressed out, like many on the bottom of the social ladder, those cortisol levels stay up, which harms your immune system. It's kind of crazy to think about how social status can affect your health so much. Have you felt it yourself or seen evidence of the social ladder? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll chat more about it next week. Bye!
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions, which means, you know, like when you're in class, you answer them, right? We have a conversation. So what is social class? When you think of social class, what do you think of?
Well, so that benefits with it.
Cool. I can get behind that. Definitely an aspect. What else?
But
Anyone?
I, my like audio kind of cut out, so I didn't like fully hear what Dakota said. But like, just kind of looking at your income, level of education, where you live in terms of like, surrounding food deserts, for example, access to healthcare, just kind of like where you stand on the ranking of all these kinds of things that combine into who you kind of are and what group you belong to,
Cool. So are there levels of social class?
for sure.
Right. So what are some, like, when you think of class, what are some of the labels and levels in class, so social class, that we apply to people?
Rich and poor.
Rich and poor? Cool. Honor, I think you're muted again.
Whoops. I guess like for example from the videos, upper middle class, lower middle class, straight middle class, lower and the very upper. So you're just kind of like all points of that spectrum.
Yeah. So when class first started being studied, some of you may know the name Karl Marx, and Karl Marx is associated with communism. And because we live in a capitalist society, we think Karl Marx is the devil, but he's not. He was just an economist who had some ideas, and he talked a lot about two different classes. In his mind, there are two classes. There was the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So if you ever heard of someone say, "Oh, you're bougie," that's the bourgeoisie, right? So the bourgeoisie were the owner class, not necessarily the rich, but the owner class. And I don't mean like our owner. I mean OWNER owner, right? And then the proletariat were the working class. So I make a distinction between the rich and the owning class because you could be really stinking rich, but according to Marx, if you don't own the means of production, then you're not part of the bourgeoisie. Meaning, like, I don't know, who's famous now? Who's someone that you know is rich and famous? Not that you actually know them, but give me a name. I think someone said something.
Trump.
Who? Trump?
Trump. He's rich and famous.
Okay, so Trump would be the bourgeoisie because he's an owner, right? He owns businesses, so on and so forth. So total bourgeoisie. Give me an athlete or a celebrity.
LeBron.
Okay, LeBron is probably bourgeoisie because he owns certain things now.
Right.
But there was a moment in LeBron's life when even though he was raking in millions of dollars, he would have been classified as a proletariat. Does that make sense? Because he's not owning, he didn't own the Cavs, right? So you can be stinking rich, but still be part of what Marx would say is a proletariat. Now then, some sociologists started breaking down later on. They're like, well, there's actually three classes. There's lower class, there's middle class, there's upper class. And America didn't always have an upper class. That's relatively new. In the history of our country, like that was basically after like World War II that we really saw the rise of the middle class. And then some other folks said, well, there's actually, classes within classes. And owner said, there's upper middle class, there's middle class, there's lower middle class, there's the working class, there's the working poor. The working poor are fascinating and highly upsetting. These are folks that work their buns off in really crappy jobs for very little pay. They're working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they're still poor. And that's a system that we have created. The idea of the American dream that if you work really hard, you're going to make it, you're going to be successful. It's not really that true for a lot of folks. And the working poor, definitely not, right? They're the folks that they're wrapping your burgers at McDonald's or, cleaning the hallways in the college. They might be working really hard, but they're not making that much money doing it. So when you think of social class, now here's a deal. I have worked with professional students for a long time. Okay. And I have worked with undergraduates who are on their way to being professional students for a long time. Here's a deal. A lot of you, not all of you, come from rather privileged backgrounds, right? Again, not saying all of you, but it would not surprise me at all if we have, you know, children of dentists and doctors and lawyers and professors on the call right now, because you have seen your parents and what they do, and you're like, man, that's cool. I want to do what mom does. I want to do what dad does. I like that. That's awesome, right? So you all have, and again, that's not all of you. I also know that there are students that are coming from, families that have nothing to do with the medical field or the dental field, and you all have just decided this is the route I'm going to go, right? So not all of you are kind of born into professional families, and but those of you who are, that comes with some privileges, right? Like for the most part, if you're born into a family of doctors, dentists, lawyers, you're not probably thinking, I wonder where my school clothes are coming from. I wonder where my next meal might be coming from, right? Those are folks that are like in those lower classes, they're thinking about that kind of stuff. Um, so when you think about class in America, and there are different ways of how societies function. Um, but most societies are somewhat of a class system. Now we're going to look at something here in a minute that kind of calls it into question. How do you think we in America are affected by a class structure that we have in existence right now?
I think that there's, especially for the upper classes, they have so much money and power now that they effectively can control the information that the lower classes would receive and influence their decision making.
Yeah, we've seen that happen for sure. Absolutely.
Kind of the points touched on in the video, like it affects your health, it affects your education, like your job, where you live, pretty much every aspect of your life.
Yeah, so dig this, and some of you might know this, right? So my father-in-law, he had an accident about, well, 4 years ago, actually, about this time of year. He was in the intensive care at OSU, and I remember going to see him with a family one night, and my brother-in-law, who at the time was a vice president of Express, the fashion place. They lived in Bexley. My wife and I are both in education. She's an occupational therapist at Olentangy schools, and you know what I do. So we're fine. We do well economically, but we don't do VP of Express well economically living in Bexley, right? That's not our cup of tea. So we're like just walking around, taking a break from being in the ICU, and my brother-in-law says, "Oh, my doctor's on this floor." I'm like, "Your doctor here?" He's like, "Yeah, executive medicine." I'm like, "Executive medicine? What the hell's that?" He's like, "Oh, it's like care for business executives." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You have it made me want to, one, punch him in the face, and two, punch the system in the face, to think that there's actually executive healthcare that is not only better than the healthcare that the poor get, it's better than the middle class get, right? Because you have to be at a certain level to be able to see the executive healthcare doctor. So, I mean, that's just how out of whack our healthcare system is. And, I include dentistry in that as well. I mean, one of the greatest things that you will do as a dental student is you will provide healthcare, dental care to folks who can't get it elsewhere. That was always one of the things that made me the most proud to work at the College of Dentistry, is when I would see the patients in the clinics. Sure, some were students, right? OSU students, staff. I had dental work done there because my students needed me to. Hey, I heard you broke a crown. Well, could that actually happened one time. I actually broke a crown at work, and within like an hour, it had spread like wildfire through the college, and I had like 5 dental students. Hey, Terry, you know, I really need a crown to graduate, or I'm 5 crowns short. I'd love to work on. So that actually happened. It was hysterical. But you know, I would always do it there to help out the students. But really, what a lot of the folks that you will see, and if you've seen the clinics, they're folks that aren't at the top of the food chain. You know, they're folks that are going to be from like urban and rural environments that are in what we would consider working poor and lower class settings, and they're coming there because that's where they can get their dental care taken care of. And it's really important that you understand and embrace that as a dental student. You know, don't be a dental student who thinks, geez, I can't wait to stop working on the poor people so I can go work with the rich people when I'm a dentist. You know, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So, you know, the whole idea of social class, and I think this is really important. Social class, the social class you were born into is completely the luck of the draw. And I want that to sink into you. You have nothing to do with the social class that you were born into, whether it is upper, middle, lower, or somewhere in between. It is completely luck of birth, luck of the draw. I always tell students, it's not your fault you're rich. It's your parents' fault that you're rich. So that's a joke, okay? So don't get mad if you're in that situation. But think about it. It's so true. And I tell you this because you need to understand that when you're working with someone who's got like Mountain Dew mouth or meth mouth, because you will when you're working in the clinics, and you look at them and you see someone that is alien and foreign to you and completely different from the life you know, you better think to yourself, that could be me. But because I was born into this situation, it's not. And what that should do for you is help you see the human being that's right in front of you, and not the person who's made choices that they shouldn't have made that got them in these situations. Because here's the thing you have to understand is people don't want to be poor. They don't want to be in lower classes. They don't want to struggle their whole life or get so disillusioned by the lack of opportunity that they turn to opioids that rot out their teeth. And now they have to come see a dental student at OSU to try to get some pain relief and get their teeth, you know, yanked out because they don't have any other options. So it is the luck of the draw. And now, before we move into more like dental care, healthcare stuff, you know what social class is now, right? And I talked about it earlier as it being like a ladder, right? So what is social mobility?
I would say probably just like the ability to move from one social class to another, whether you go like up the ladder or even down the ladder.
I would say that you are spot on correct. That is exactly what social mobility is. Are we a socially mobile society?
Yes, but not to certain extents. Maybe. Yes, but limited.
Can anybody like get behind what Dakota said? I can. I teach the stuff, so if I can get behind it, then it's right on the money, right? So, because you know that teachers know everything. Absolutely. So here's the idea: we are told for you know forever, like the American dream is, you can come from nothing and become a millionaire, right? And it's possible. It is completely possible. We have stories, you know, about people doing that. But guess what? For those of you that have taken statistics, you know the bell curve, right? And then what do you have outside the bell curve at the far ends? What do you call that? The outliers, right? Those folks that have like, I came from nothing and I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and look at me now. I burn money like it's nothing. I drive in limousines. Those are the outliers. But what's happened is that power elite that I talked about, they've made us all think, you can do this, man. You can totally become the rags to riches story. And we bought into it. And that's one of the ways that power stays in power. Because, you know, there's a great quote that the reason that socialism never took effect in America is because we all think we're one step away from being millionaires, right? We all think that we can make it. The fact of the matter is, we can't. And we are becoming less of a socially mobile society than we used to be. Like I said, the middle class came from World War II when the GIs came back and they had the GI, like the GI Bill was instated, right? And Roosevelt had just gotten us out of the Depression, and depending upon what you read, going to war kind of helped that. But there are also some things that they did that were smart to kind of take, break up banks and make sure that rich people's money and everybody else's money couldn't be combined together. Anyway, the reason is one of the things that caused the Great Depression is they're investing poor people's money and middle class people, the lower classes money, and it because of the investing, they lost it. And that actually happened in 2007 too, when we had the Great Recession. Anyway, so out of World War II, the middle class is created because of the GI Bill. You have people suddenly going to college. You've got these good paying jobs coming back where we got a lot of manufacturing going on. So even if you don't have a college education, you could work at a factory and live great, right? So that social infrastructure is kind of not in place the way it used to be. So we have become less of a socially mobile society. So the idea that someone can be born on the lowest rung and even advance up a rung has become much more challenging. Like 10% of the population, can switch from where they were born into the next social ladder, mobility ladder. Conversely, those folks that are born more at the top, they tend to stay in the top because they have support systems that make sure they do stay in the top. So just for the sake of time, because I know it's I think this is done around 7:30, I will answer this next one. When you add gender and race to the mix, you will see that it makes you less socially mobile. And it's no surprise that, or it's probably not shocking to you that, blacks make less than whites across the board. And don't be the person who pulls out, well, I know a black guy who's a millionaire. Again, outlier, okay? It's no surprise that to you all that women make less than men across the board. So here in 2020, we still have this problem. So, one of the greatest indicators of poverty is single parent households. Who typically runs a single parent household?
The mother.
Yep. So when, you've got these households where dad's kind of skated, and mom's doing the work, and mom, is getting paid less than her male counterparts, you can kind of connect the dots there. So one of the things I want to talk to you about briefly is the idea of caste versus class. So do any of you know what a caste system is? So the most common one would be the caste system in India that has been, outlawed for decades. Some would say that there's still kind of a underground caste system in place still. But the caste system was, how it worked is there are 4 classes, or castes rather, and then at the very bottom underneath the 4 was a system, a caste called the untouchables. So I believe the Brahmins were at the top, and then they were like the academics and the religious leaders. Then the next caste was like your kings, your politicians, then you had your merchants, and you had your working class, and then you had these untouchables. Here's the deal. You were born to a caste and you weren't getting out of it. There was no social mobility, which if you're a Brahmin or if you're at the top, cool. But if you're untouchable, you stay that way. And you could not marry into another caste, anything like that. So I tell you this, and if you look at the slide, this is kind of like a spectrum from caste on one end to class on the other. We say that we are a class society. However, what I challenge you to think about, if social mobility is becoming increasingly harder in our society, where do we really lie on the spectrum? Are we a classist society, or are we somewhere in the middle, or leaning more towards an unofficial caste system. And that might seem a little bit dramatic, but when there is no social mobility, or when it keeps getting smaller and smaller, it's it's not that far-fetched to think of us in that point of view. So what does this mean to you? So here you are, you're like, look, dude, I want to be a dentist, and I'm not even there yet. I'm not even in dental school yet. So why are you throwing all this at at me? Well, one, because this organization is all about that. That's why we made it: service, education, and activism in dentistry. Two, I want you to be dentists, dental students, and then dentists who really, really think about these issues when you practice. And so the first thing I would say is practice with compassion. One of the things that I love about working at OU is, we have a list of essential values, and OSU has those as well. The college dentistry has them as well. The essential value that when I looked at this position, because, it took me a lot to get me out of OSU, because I love working with all of you so much and miss it tremendously still, was one of the stated values was a commitment to service, service, generosity, and compassion. Like, wow, they actually put that out there, like compassion. I've never actually worked for a place that puts that out for the world to see, because usually that's the word like, ooh, compassion. That's kind of mamby-pamby, right? But man, think about the idea of what compassion is. It is understanding someone's suffering and working to alleviate the suffering of that individual. So I challenge you to live with compassion now as undergraduates. I challenge you when you are working with, because I know a lot of you are doing great service, maybe not as much as you used to because of COVID, but do it with compassion, not because you're trying to check a box to get to dental school. And I know that most of you aren't like that. I know that most of you are super compassionate and just amazing human beings. So when you're practicing as a dental student, and when you're in the field as a dentist, practice with compassion. Work in areas that are underserved. Okay? Provide free dentistry. Now look, you don't have to, like, I'm not saying, wait, what are you saying, dude? You don't want me to make any money? Nope, I'm not saying that at all. You guys are going to work your tails off. I almost said asses, but I want to be professional, so I didn't say it. See what I did there? See what I did there? I still got to say it. You're going to work really, really hard in dental school, and, you'll go into some debt, most of you, because it's expensive. I want you to be economically secure, and odds are you will be, right? Because dentists do well. But give of your time, right? Do pro bono work in clinics like, Faith Mission downtown. They have a dental office, and the homeless folks that stay at the mission can come and get dentistry for free. Guess who provides it? Well, last time I was there, my former dentist was one of the providers, an OSU graduate. So be a dentist like that. Remember that we're all in this together, and that it could be you. Like I said, that person that you're looking down on that has, drank so much Mountain Dew, because that's a common thing that you'll see when you work with folks from like Southern Ohio, Appalachia, where we have the highest rates of poverty in Ohio, and they're coming to the dental clinic to get their teeth pulled. Don't make the judgment. Don't be the dental student. And I've seen these students that they don't practice with compassion. They practice with judgment. Don't be that dentist, because we're all in this together, and remember that could be you. But through the luck of the draw, it's not. And then I challenge you this. I want you to be a part of a pipeline of dental health care and education. It's both socially just, and it's also very pragmatic for society. What does this mean? So, you will be serving folks. I mean, inherently, in what you do, you're providing service. And you can skate on that pretty easily. Like, look, dude, I just made this person smile really great, and now they feel better about themselves. Yep, you did, and that's so awesome. But be a part of a pipeline that working with folks that are from underserved areas and underrepresented in, healthcare, that they can look to you and say, hey, I want to be like Dr. Mead. I want to be like Dr. Droga. That's who I want to be. And I'm some poor kid who never had these ideas and never had these dreams. But because of you practicing with compassion and serving in the areas that you're serving in and understanding these things I'm talking about, they look to you and they're like, I can be just like them. And you can even like work to create these pipelines. And a pipeline is something like, working with an elementary school kid, going to talk about dentistry to classes, in junior high school, in underserved areas, so they can see, wow, this could be something I do. So the med school, and this is something I always wanted us to do in the dental school. I kept trying to push us in that direction. We never quite got there. OSU's med school, however, has this program. I don't know if you know who Quinn Capers is, but he recently left OSU. Big loss for us. But he is like the man when it comes to working with diversity and inclusion, and creating pipelines to OSU's med school. And he had this one program that worked with kindergartners, and they gave them white coats. And you want to like get emotionally like, no, I want to cry. Watch a bunch of poor kids in kindergarten getting white coated and thinking about already their future as a doctor. You can do that too. I challenge you to do that. So, I want to end because, it's holiday time, Thanksgiving time and all that, with this quote. So some of you may know this story, The Christmas Carol, right? Scrooge, the ghost can see the guy, right? So classic book. I always read it starting December 1st, and I read it every year. This is one of my favorite quotes in all of literature. So here's the scenario. This is the scene. Scrooge, who was a huge rich jerk, didn't give of himself to anybody, just a miser, horrible guy, miserable. He had this business partner named Jacob Marley, okay? And if you know the story, Scrooge gets visited by the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. But the cat who sets the stage for him is the ghost of his former business partner, Jacob Marley. So Jacob comes into Scrooge's bedroom, and he's looking all scary because he's got chains and all the stuff around him. And they sit down, have this conversation, and this is what Scrooge says to Jacob. He says, "But you're always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. And this is what Jacob says, the ghost, and he says this like angrily. He says, "Business," cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. "Mankind was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The deals of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." Your business will be helping others in awesome, profound, life-changing ways. But also make sure that you remember that your business is all of these things as well. And that's the role that you can play in making sure that no matter where folks fall on that social class ladder, that because of you, they're getting access to good dental health care. That's all I got. I'm out. I'm out of things to say. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, comments they want to make.
Yeah, quick comment. So like, it's funny. One of my questions on the Kira thing, which was for the OSU interview, was kind of like putting you in that scenario of, you have a friend who's kind of like from a low socioeconomic background. They're having financial problems, and they have this one scholarship that they have to keep in order to pay for college. Well, this friend approaches you and says, "You know what? I kind of want to cheat off a test because I really don't think I'll have time to study. I don't think I have the resources to get a good grade on this, and my scholarship is riding on this final exam score. How do you respond?" Well, that kind of just brings up all these topics of, compassion. You do want to like think from their eyes, this scholarship is super important. If they don't have the financial backing from it, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows, like, the life impact is going to have on their family, friends, whether they maybe can afford other things in their life, whether it's food, healthcare, if this whole education side is just cut off. So, like, you kind of have to So obviously, like that's a super applicable to something that just like happened. And you kind of want to consider, topics like this. Sometimes it's easy to forget, oh, it's such big picture. It's a great thing to like preach in a lecture, but applying it to a situation, I don't really see where I can do that. Well, I mean, Terry's giving you a bunch of examples during his presentation, and whether it's with your friends or your family, ways for you to like practice, compassion, empathy, looking through the eyes of another person or walking to someone else's shoes. It's super important. And even if if you can't really recall like examples of it, they are there. You just gotta be kind of super mindful of that.
But don't help someone cheat.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's ethics. Yeah.
Right. I definitely made sure to say that. Like,
Good,
although you
good.
want to look out for your friend, there's a
Yep.
caveat of you still are not going to help them cheat. So,
I, I
like,
I hope you don't take away from what I said tonight. Is I think Kip said it's okay to help people cheat.
yeah,
That's what the message was.
yep. And so with that, I think that pretty much concludes everything. I'm going to pull up my screen here and just go through, oops, just go through some announcements real quick. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Terry, on behalf of all of us. It was a great presentation as always. We love having you here. It's amazing hearing you talk, and it's a super relevant and super important presentation. So thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. It just felt really good to see all of you, and I'm so proud of all of you. I really am. And just keep up the good work. Keep this organization going, and do all the good work that I know you will do as human beings, as dental students, and as dentists. So you all have a great Thanksgiving and holiday season, and stay healthy, stay safe. Take care. Good night.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So I'm going to go through this super quickly because it's all super basic. So first, unfortunately, all volunteering is done, kind of canceled, even though we had some plans. With COVID restrictions, we kind of have to shut them down again. So we're just going to have to wait till next year. Hopefully things change. Kind of like at the start of next year, before the next semester starts up, definitely just keep eyes on your emails. We're definitely going to be communicating a lot with you of like, what our plans are going forward, scheduling, whether we start opening up volunteering again, stuff like that. Kind of how we like teased a couple of times throughout the semester. If you would like to create like a small little presentation, kind of have how our e-board members did, a topic of your choice, or if you like some suggestions from us, we could always give them to you. This is kind of a great way to add something on your resume, public speaking on like possibly dental related topic to like a bigger crowd. That's always something that could be really good for your resume. And then, yeah, pretty much just look out for volunteering. Similar to this semester, we're going to have guest speakers come in, possibly dental students, a little more applicable to us, more conversation, probably with them. And yeah, it's been a great year. I think we've overcome some of these challenges pretty well. And we're looking forward to hopefully having a good next semester too, depending on how that rolls out. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we good?
I think we're good. All right. So I think since all you board members here, we can just like at the end of this year or like beginning of next year, we can just like plan out a Zoom meeting. Cause like we probably want to wait till next year, honestly, so to like let the college figure out what's going on, so then we can like plan according to it. So yeah, I think that
But
should be.
things will be pretty fluid. I feel like still. I feel like it's going to be back and forth between what they want to let us do, especially with us just getting back. I feel like restrictions might be tight and then might ease up, but who knows? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely gonna be like at the end of next semester when we start getting to do things again, probably. But I mean, we'll just kind of have to wait and see.
I'm going. See.
All right, I think we're good. See you guys later. Maybe start of next year.
All right, take care.
See ya. Stop recording.